My name is Denise Peckham. I am one of the pastors here, and I have the privilege this morning of serving you in worship, bringing the word and the message. And so thank you for that privilege and that honor of being in service to you this morning. Last week, Clay Horton started a three-part series based on the mission and ministry or vision of this church: loving God, serving others, transforming lives. And it really is at the core of the mission and ministry of this church. And I don't think many people realize just how important that mission and ministry is. It really drives everything that the church does. Every ministry, every outreach is part of those three terms: loving God, serving others, transforming lives. Last week, Clay started with loving God, and he used the text that says we are to love the Lord our God with all our heart and mind and soul and strength. But the second part of that is equally as important, that we are to love our neighbor as ourselves. But what exactly does loving our neighbor as ourselves look like? And I think we'll find at least a clue to that in the Gospel of Matthew in the 25th chapter. Listen now for what Jesus is saying to those who are gathered around him. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will put the sheep at his right hand and the goats at the left. Then the king will say to those at his right hand, "Come, you that are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when was it that we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it that we saw you sick or in prison and visited you?" And the king will answer them, "Truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me." Then he will say to those at his left hand, "You that are accursed, depart from me into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not welcome me. Naked, and you did not give me clothing. Sick and in prison, and you did not visit me." Then they will also answer, "Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and did not take care of you?" Then he will answer them, "Truly I tell you, just as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me." And these will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life. Ooh, that's a little pushy. That nice, calm, compassionate Jesus that we all have in our minds, that was called a tongue lashing. If you've never received one, consider this the first. Serving others. We're all called to serve others, and it's perhaps one of the most difficult things that we're called to do, because after all, serving others means that at some level we need to give up something of ourselves for the sake of someone else, right? We have to give up our time, perhaps our financial resources. Perhaps when we look in our closets and we see that we have 4 or 5 coats, we might have to share a coat with someone who's cold. And, we get emotionally attached to our stuff, and it's really difficult to do. Sometimes serving others means that we have to risk being in relationship with people that are not like us at all. And it might even mean that some of those people that we are called to serve might actually mean to do us harm or inadvertently hurt us in one way or another. So serving others is not something that comes naturally to human beings, unless, of course, those people are just like us and we're really comfortable with them. Then, of course, it's easy to serve others. But Jesus is not talking about easy here. And I hope I didn't read it in such a way that you might have missed that line in there. No, instead what you get is this really tough parable about separating people, the people that have love and compassion and don't even realize it, and the people who think they have love and compassion and don't realize it. You know, this text is probably pretty well known in the United Methodist Church. A lot of United Methodists believe that this is really foundational to who they are as a people, but it's not just for United Methodists. The Sisters of Charity, or the Missionaries of Charity, started by Mother Teresa, started that whole ministry based on this text. And when I think of Mother Teresa, I don't think of judgment. I don't think of Jesus coming along and separating sheep and goats. Normally, I think of these beautiful little women that go around picking up the diseased in Calcutta and binding their wounds and serving in that very humble and difficult capacity. So when I think about someone like Mother Teresa saying this is foundational to who we are, I have to stop and pause and think, what does that mean for me then? What does that mean for God's church? What does that mean for those who are following Jesus Christ? I was hungry. I was thirsty. I was sick. And I was in prison. The part of this text that we never really deal with is the surprise factor in it, I think. The people who are judged, the sheep and the goats, are very surprised by how they've been separated. The sheep can't understand why they're chosen to go on the right. What do you mean? We never did that for you. We never fed you. We never clothed you. We never visited you. Isn't it true that so often the people who are most Christ-like, the people whose hands and hearts are open to the needs around them, are the people who least realize it? They just do in response to this outpouring of love that Jesus has poured into them. And they just continually go about their day doing the work of Christ in the world. But the goats are surprised too. We're good people. We put money in the offering plate. We've taken care of some people in our lives. And I wonder if Jesus ever steps back and thinks, well, sure you do. The people that you're closest to, that you're most comfortable with. It's a great thing to be kind to people who can repay you. And Jesus is almost saying, I'm not sure you're getting it. I'm not sure you're understanding the depth of the love that I've poured into you and the depth of the love that's expected for you to pour out into the lives of others. You see, at the end of the day, this gift of grace that we've received, this gift of faith, is not about us. Not really. I mean, sure, it's about us when we receive the gift of grace, but then what do we do with it? Right, we're supposed to do something with this gift. And not just in the places where we feel most comfortable. I was watching the news last night, and there was this wonderful news story on about the Wounded Warrior Project. I hope you've heard of it, and if not, please go look up the Wounded Warrior Project. It's a great project. It helps veterans to come back into a non-military life, and it gives them some tools to work with and some retraining. And yesterday, there was a softball game that the Wounded Warriors were part of. These men that played softball were missing a limb, an arm, a foot, part of their leg. And we don't normally think about these types of people playing softball, right? People that are missing limbs, generally we don't consider that they're out on a softball field. Well, we saw part of that game on the news. It was astounding to watch them hit the ball and run around the bases. I was just blown away by that. But then they interviewed them. You know, why would they be out on a Saturday afternoon playing softball? Well, one of the men that they interviewed said this: there are children in our communities who are born without limbs, or by accident or disease have lost arms or feet or legs. and we want to send them to summer camp to serve the least of these out of our deepest pain. The sheep and the goats. Whether he realized what he was saying, this was about serving. Sure, they were having a great time, and not all service is doom and gloom. I mean, I love serving. But sometimes the best place you can serve is out of the deepest pain that you've experienced in your own life. And you give such a gift to those around you. I think it's difficult to think about what it means to serve others, what it really means for us as a people. Don has often said, the senior pastor who normally preaches in the sanctuary but preaches here once in a while as well, Don has often said that we need to give people the tools to live independently and live well. That it's really important to retain the dignity of the human being that you're assisting. And very often that means instead of just passing a piece of bread to somebody who's hungry, it might mean that we teach skills, that we give hope, that we don't form codependent relationships, so that the person who's hungry remains hungry until the next time I feel like giving another slice of bread. Right? The saying is that you can give a man a fish or you can teach a man to fish and he'll eat for a lifetime. Things like Project Hope and Project Next Generation, House on the Corner, all signature ministries of this congregation are in place to help people learn what it means to live independently, to give people that might have been in generational or situational poverty the tools they need to learn how to live, to serve them as fellow human beings and not just as people with their hands open, but to recognize that they have value and worth, even in the tough place that they find themselves. Because I don't know about you, but I have been in some tough places in my life. And I am so thankful for the people that came up beside me and helped me get to where I needed to go, without belittling me or giving my self-esteem another blow, but instead saying, you have value and worth, and we're going to help you get past this. There are other ways that we can help. Certainly, we can serve people through some of the agencies that are supported, not just by this church, but by agencies that some of the companies you work for might support. We support things like Emily's Place, and we support Family Promise, and any other number of local organizations that help the homeless, the abused, the underserved in our communities. There are times where we can actually go and volunteer, build healthy relationships, sometimes bring food, sometimes just bring a listening ear. Because what you learn when you serve people is sometimes they just need to tell their story. And how much power do we receive when we get to tell our story? Jesus wasn't just talking about those underprivileged, though. When he talks about visiting the sick and the prisoner, I often thought about the sick and the prisoner. And what does it mean to be sick and to be in prison? How many people do we know that are in the prison that they've created in their mind? Locked up, sad beyond measure, angry to the point of exploding. Who is the prisoner in your midst? Certainly not just the people behind bars, but the people locked up in their own mess and junk, so much so they can't get out. Who needs a visit? How can you serve the least of these in your midst? I would say that sometimes those prisoners live right next door to us in our neighborhoods. Those in prison don't always include things like murderers and rapists and sex offenders. Sometimes it's the father who stole the groceries so his family can eat. Who's visiting Who's visiting him? Telling him that he has value and worth. This parable, as disturbing as it might be for all of us, is really a message clearly for all of the followers of Jesus. That a belief, and I'm going to say this, and okay, so this is a pastor, belief is not enough. I can believe all the right things. I can believe the most profound Trinitarian theology there is. I might have gotten an A on every paper in seminary. And at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. Because what matters is what I do with this thing that I have called faith. Are my hands open? Is my heart broken? Is there someone sitting next to me that I might serve as Jesus would serve? While there is so much condemnation in this text, I would challenge you to find the grace in the text. Find the grace in the text. Jesus is saying to you, you know who's hungry. You know who's thirsty. The sick need your help. Not to keep them in their place, but to lift them from where they are so that they might become the fully human beings in the image of God that they were meant to become. You can do that. And I would say, based simply on my own experience, that you will begin to see the face of Jesus in the least of these. And one day, you will begin to see the face of Jesus in yourself. Your life will never be the same. Your life will be transformed.